Libra Woman, the Lover of Balance and Beauty, Episode 3, The Mirror That Didn't Distort. Chapter 1, Rooftop, First Drafts of Wit. The rooftop party glittered like a laid-out constellation, string lights, glass clinks, the low hum of people pleased to be above the city for an evening. She arrived with a loose plan, 30 minutes, one sparkling water, then home to bath and the quiet ritual of her lamp. Plans, however, have a way of bending around certain people. He was leaning against the guardrail as if he'd been hired to make the skyline more handsome. Gemini, she clocked it before he said so, quick-eyed, alert to subtext, a smile that seemed to be thinking 3 clever things for everyone it let out. "Your earrings are doing something diplomatic with the moon," he said by way of hello. She laughed, not because it was a line, but because it was true. The silver crescents caught the light like they knew what they were doing. "Is this your opening move?" she asked. "It's the middle move," he said. "Opening move was noticing you were talking to your drink like it was an ally." "It is," she said. "We made a pact earlier. I drink slowly and it doesn't embarrass me." He grinned, delighted to be met. They fell into the kind of talk that feels like a paved path after rain, clean, a little reflective, the edges softened. He asked questions and listened to the answers, not just the rhythms of speaking. She noticed the absence of push. He didn't try to rush her toward a punchline or a promise. When a friend interrupted to pull him into a photo, he said, 2 minutes, then turned back to her and added, "Only if you're still here." He didn't stake a claim. He asked for time and offered presence. They drifted to a quieter corner near a planter of rosemary and mint. He plucked a sprig and held it under her nose. "Peppermint diffuses nerves," he said, "and bad jokes." "Then keep it," she said. "You might need backup." They played a game, his suggestion, called True or Truer. 2 statements, both honest, one more vulnerable. True, "I'm good at leaving parties before anyone notices." Truer, "I'm tired of being the person who always leaves early." He nodded like he'd been expecting a door and was pleased she'd opened a window instead. His turn, "True, I love beginnings." Truer, "I've confused beginning with being." They let that sit, let the night arrange itself around the admission. He didn't ask for her number right away. He asked what kind of mornings she liked. "Quiet," she said. "Music soft enough to feel like permission." "Then we'll leave the evening there," he said. "I don't want to shout over your mornings." She lingered 30 minutes, then 45, because conversation kept unfolding into particularities. Favorite bridges, the usefulness of silence, the way compromise could be an art rather than a surrender. When the party thinned and the city pulled its light inward, he looked at her as if turning a page he wanted to keep clean. "I'd like to see you when neither of us is pretending to be good at parties," he said. "Coffee," she offered, "somewhere that doesn't mistake volume for charm." He saluted the moon with her earring and said, "Deal." On the street, cool air lifted her hair and her certainty. She felt the first draft of something that might become a life, conversation as architecture, laughter as beam, curiosity as the kind of window you keep open even in winter. No sparkler fizz, no rush, just a steady flame, bright enough to see herself by. Chapter 2, The Art of Saying Exactly Enough. They chose a cafe with large windows and unambitious music, the kind of place that served coffee as if each cup wanted its own conversation. He arrived with a newspaper folded into quarters and 2 anecdotes about pigeons, one scientific, one almost mythic. She arrived with her lamplit calm and a willingness to be surprised. "House rule," he said, sliding into the booth. "We answer questions in complete sentences." "That sounds like a Gemini rule," she said. "It's a human rule," he countered, "but I'll host." They traded particulars not as resumes but as proofs of life. He told her about a childhood spent moving apartments often enough to develop an affection for cardboard. She told him about the notebook where she draws 3 columns, truth, care, cost, and how she's learning to make the numbers meet. He didn't laugh at her columns. He asked how she decides which line gets to be true. She found herself explaining, and in the explaining, trusting. When a couple nearby began a hushed squall, the room's air shifted. He noticed her glance toward them and said, "We can share a silence for them." They did. It felt like a tiny prayer, unobtrusive, offered with no demand. "Can I ask about the scorch marks?" he said later, not tiptoeing, not barging. "You may," she said, meeting him on the path he'd marked. She told him broad strokes, fire and ash, a door she closed. He didn't audition sympathy or flex wisdom. He said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. I like the person I'm meeting who walked out of it." She breathed easier, the way you do when a room has good ventilation. They walked after the river, a silver corridor. He matched her pace without comment, which is to say he respected it. At a railing they stopped. "What does good conflict look like to you?" he asked. "Like a dance," she said, "not a duel." "Then we'll learn the steps," he said, as if it were inevitable they'd need them, and equally inevitable they could. They kissed later at her building stoop, the kiss not a demand but a sentence with careful punctuation. His fingers curved at her jaw as if asking the bone a question. She answered by leaning closer. Heat gathered, sure and uncomplicated, like a well-lit room. When he edged forward, he paused. When she edged back, he waited. The restraint didn't dilute desire, it dressed it correctly. "Come up," she asked, testing the shape of impulsive after so many months of careful. "I'd like to," he said warmly, "and I also like the promise of next time." He looked at her mouth, then at her eyes, and chose her eyes. "Let me walk you to your door and leave wanting." She laughed, stunned by how much yes there was in no. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that might have felt boyish from someone else, but from him it read as, "I see the whole of you, not only the place desire gathers." Upstairs alone, she didn't feel rejected. She felt preserved. He had put a comma where others might have insisted on an exclamation point. In her notebook, she wrote, "Compromise that enlarges both people is just another word for connection." The city purred outside as if co-signing. Chapter 3, Rooms with Windows. They learned each other's days the way cartographers learn coasts, not by conquering but by careful tracing. They sent each other small, particular things, a photo of a window whose plants looked like they were gossiping, a line from a poem about gentleness being an accuracy, not a softness. He sent a voice note once, nothing more than him saying her name at different speeds, as if testing which tempo pleased the air most. They cooked together on a Saturday that felt unhurried enough to belong to them. He chopped with the precision of someone who understood parallel lines. She zested lemons like confetti. When the pasta was done, he set the table as if it were an instrument, forks aligned, a sprig of mint near her water, a napkin creased like a promise. They ate with the lilt of people who enjoy food and the person across from them equally. On the couch, conversation slid from play to quiet. He tucked one leg under, turned to face her fully. "I like how you balance the room," he said, "not by smoothing it, but by listening to what it wants to be." "And you tilt it," she said. "In interesting ways, you make air move." They kissed, and this time the kiss did not stop at punctuation. His hands were confident but never presumptive, the kind of touch that asks a dozen respectful questions and waits for each answer. She guided him when she wanted a slower chord, answered him when he offered a quicker rhythm. They breathed like musicians counting the same measure. Clothes became afterthoughts, not discarded in a rush but set aside as if they deserved not to be tripped over later. The room's light gentled. He mapped the hollow below her collarbone with his mouth, reverent, and paused whenever she inhaled sharply, not to retreat but to calibrate. She felt attended to rather than performed at, heat folding into trust. When they finally moved in tandem, the motion felt less like crescendo and more like tide, returning, withdrawing, returning, never needing to crash to prove it was ocean. After he didn't claim victory or compose a thesis, he laughed softly, forehead against hers. "You make compromise feel like connection," he murmured, the sentence arriving like a perfect fit. She felt the words settle somewhere sturdy. Dozed for a while, and when they woke, conflict knocked like a polite neighbor, a plan they'd both misremembered, a friend's invitation neither wanted to decline. She waited for the temperature to rise. It didn't. He said, "I'm tempted to make a case," smiling. "But I'd rather make an exchange. You take the gallery tonight, I'll take the morning train with you tomorrow." It wasn't capitulation, it was choreography. She agreed, not out of relief, but out of pleasure at the shape the solution made between them. Before bed, she opened a window. Cool air walked in and sat politely on the edge of the sill. "Any draft?" he asked, joining her, bare feet quiet on the floor. "Only the kind that keeps a room honest," she said. They stood there, the city doing its nocturnal work, their bodies warm and easy. She registered something she hadn't allowed herself in a long time, the sensation of not performing. She wasn't auditioning for tenderness. She wasn't arranging herself around someone's weather. She was just here, seen without being edited, desired without being endangered, balanced, not balancing. Chapter 4, The Calm with Teeth. Compatibility, she learned, wasn't a cushion, it was a stance. With him, calm had teeth. It could bite through tangles without drawing blood. When a project of hers slipped a deadline, he didn't launch into fixes or fault. He brewed tea, sat cross-legged on the floor and said, "Give me the 3 sentences you're afraid to say to yourself." She did. He didn't revise them. He folded them into smaller, truer sentences until they fit in her pocket. He experimented with routine without fossilizing it. Tuesdays became for food markets, Thursdays for staying up too late telling childhood stories they hadn't told themselves in years. He proposed a new ritual, 1 conflict practice a week, small, contained, training wheels. She laughed, agreed. The practice was silly and real at once, narrating a minor annoyance without indictment, reflecting it back without defense, inventing a solution neither had considered. It took 10 minutes. It changed their days. Intimacy grew the way ivy grows, patiently, finding surfaces, greening whatever it touched. They touched more and differently, hands at the small of her back in the kitchen, her palm resting at the base of his throat when she wanted to slow the tempo. a knee pressed to a thigh beneath a cafe table to say, "I'm here, talk freely." Some nights their lovemaking was a bright, playful duet, laughter and murmured yesies, and the kind of delight that makes time consult its watch. Other nights it was hush and gravity, heat like a candle steadying, bodies moving with the knowledge that they didn't have to prove anything to be believed. Always, consent threaded the room like a strong, invisible ribbon, questions asked, answers honored, adjustments made with grace. Once in the middle of everything, he paused and looked at her as if remembering something essential. "You start with beauty," he said softly, "and then you let truth in." She smiled back. "You start with curiosity, and then you let care stay." They resumed, not to crescendo, but to continue, because continuation was the point. They hosted friends for dinner and discovered they were good at being a they without becoming a performance of coupledom. He told a story. She finished it not by correcting, but by braiding in the part he'd left out because it mattered to her. After the guests left, they did the dishes like people who understood how domestic tasks can be love syllables. He washed, she dried. Both of them sang badly to a song that had no reason to be as catchy as it was. A friction arrived on a Sunday, her need for quiet colliding with his sudden invitation to a last-minute reading across town. Old versions of her might have gone to avoid disappointing someone. Old versions of him might have pushed to avoid feeling rejected. The new versions did something simple. He said, "I want to go." She said, "I want to stay." He kissed her and went. She ran a bath and stayed. Later, he came back giddy with a poem. She met him at the door with damp hair and a grin. They traded highlights like kids. No one paid a tax. At night, she watched him sleep and felt that rare, formidable peace that isn't absence of trouble but presence of trust. She let herself imagine the long form, birthdays with laughter, fights with rules, Sundays with markets, or solitude or both, a life in which compromise was not erasure but design. "You see me clearly," she whispered into the dark. He stirred half asleep. "Lucky me," he said, and even drowsy, he found the exact words. Chapter 5, Whether You Can Trust. Autumn arrived the way a kindly teacher enters a room calm with purpose. They adjusted accordingly. He swapped linen for corduroy. She set a heavier throw over the couch and lit a candle that smelled like pear and something faintly medicinal she called clarity. Their days moved like a well-edited essay, brisk, precise, with surprising tenderness in footnotes. They took a weekend train to a town with an old observatory. The docent had a voice like a kettle, the telescope a patience that humbled them. He read plaques aloud with theatrical seriousness. She countered with quiet facts she'd half remembered from school. That night, in a small inn whose window framed a square of stars, they slipped beneath crisp sheets and let the day melt. They kissed with the kind of curiosity that has learned its partner's map and still wants to be shown around. His mouth said questions, her said answers, and then asked back. They moved slowly, then slower, not because restraint was a rule, but because savoring had become second nature. When he paused to breathe, she felt desire sharpen in the pause rather than tumble past it. The room held them without needing to name what it was holding. After they lay on their backs like a small constellation of two, he reached for her hand and traced her knuckles as if they were coordinates. "I like the way you argue," he said, musing into the ceiling. "We didn't argue," she said, amused. "I know," he said. "I just mean when we do, it feels like we're learning weather, not predicting doom." She turned her head toward him. "Whether you can trust," she offered. "Exactly," he rolled to face her, smile lazy with contentment. "You make compromise feel like connection." She felt the sentence land with its familiar rightness. "And you make curiosity feel like care," she answered. Back in the city, life resumed its tempo. He began a new project that required late nights and nimble thinking. She navigated a leadership shift at work without letting it tilt her spine. When they were tired, they didn't mistake fatigue for failure. He texted, "Verging on puddle brain, need your voice later." She replied with a laughing emoji and a time. At 9, she called. They spoke about nothing first, her neighbor's feral basil, a pigeon with charismatic shoulders, until his mind unknotted itself. When it was her turn to unload, he listened like a page listens to ink, porous, ready, unafraid of thickness. On a Thursday, they cooked dinner for his oldest friend, the kind who arrives with both jokes and receipts. The friend watched them move around the kitchen, the wordless passes of olive oil and salt, the way he tasted a sauce and looked to her face before pronouncing it good. Later, when she went to fetch more glasses, the friend said quietly, "I've never seen you this regulated." "Sexy compliment," he quipped, then softened. "It is, isn't it?" When she returned, they shifted easily into a trio again. No performance, no alliance building, just the feeling that their two could make room for others without losing its shape. That weekend, a small conflict arrived, plans overlapping, both of them having committed to different people, same time. They caught it early, not because they were perfect, but because they had learned to keep the windows cracked. He proposed a coin toss, she proposed a trade. They chose her goddaughter's school play that night, his sister's dinner on Sunday, and sent texts in which both took turns saying, "We got our wires crossed, my bad." No one bled, everyone showed up. The play was adorable, the dinner loud, their bed afterward a soft landing. In her notebook, she drew the columns she used to need. Truth and care met each other with less arithmetic. Cost, once its own imposing architecture, shrank to something she could tuck into the margins. She didn't close the notebook. She simply forgot to reach for it for a while. Chapter 6, the rule book they wrote. They didn't call them rules at first, just ways we like to do things. He suggested making them visible, not as commandments, but as a menu. Menus give options, he said. Commandments assume you'll cheat. They wrote them at the kitchen table on a slow Sunday. Ask before fixing. 1. Assume kindness, confirm facts. 2. Name the failing, then name the need. 3. Leave room for delight. 4. If one of us is overwhelmed, the other becomes the calm, not the coach. 5. Kisses before conclusions. He drew doodles in the margins, a kite for delight, a pair of clinking mugs for calm. She color-coded nothing, a minor miracle, then underlined kisses before conclusions with a flourish she didn't know she had in her. They taped the page inside a cupboard door, a private constitution. Practice made it real. When her inbox became a thicket and she arrived at his place with that particular knot at the base of her skull, he opened the cupboard, kissed her forehead, then asked, "Feeling?" She sighed, "Overfull. Need. Quiet next to a person." He made tea, cued their softest playlist, and crucially did not offer to triage her tasks. The knot loosened. Later, when he spiraled about a misphrased email, she didn't grade his worry. She took his phone, put it on the mantel, and sat on the rug with him until the spiral lost interest. Intimacy adapted to their clarity. The permission they'd built in conversation translated in the most physical ways, fewer assumptions, more play. Sometimes they were quick and laughing, urgent with the electricity of a good day. Sometimes they were unhurried, tracing each other as if we're learning familiar streets at dawn. He would pause and ask with a glance, she'd answer with touch. When something didn't land, they adjusted without narrative. Pleasure, it turned out, like being listened to. One evening mid-kiss he murmured, "What are you thinking?" She answered honestly, "How your shoulder blade feels like a secret hinge." He blinked, delighted. "Use it," he said, and she did, shifting him just so, both of them laughing when the adjustment unlocked a better rhythm. Connection as collaboration, bodies agreeing to be in the same paragraph. Not every day was smooth. A week arrived with small antagonisms, his late train, her boss's odd email, a neighbor whose music misunderstood the purpose of bass. They both grew short of sentence. On Friday they snapped at the same time, he about towels left damp on a chair, she about his talent for leaving cupboard doors ajar. They stopped, recognized the absurdity, and invoked the rulebook. Kisses before conclusions. The first kiss was stiff with residue, the second found its way. They returned to words with less defense in their pockets. That night they ordered takeout and watched a documentary about bridges. He paused to ask, "What kind are we?" She thought. "Suspension," she said finally. "Light-looking, strong-spined, we flex." He nodded, pleased. "I'll take cables over columns any day." They had begun to meet each other's circles of friends without feeling like ambassadors. She noticed an ease in herself, less narrating, more being. At a party, she didn't hover at his elbow. She drifted and returned, the way people do when they trust the person they came with will still be where they left them, or somewhere better. When she rejoined him, he filled her palm with a single olive, like an offering. "For the person who likes green things and good metaphors," he said. Walking home, she admitted something she'd only recently understood. "I used to perform balance," she said. "Now it feels integrated." He squeezed her hand. "You traded poise for presence," he said. "I like the swap." A gust of wind lifted a newspaper across the sidewalk. They stepped over it easily, coordinated without conferring. "Add to the menu," he asked. "What?" "Dance with the weather," he said. "Always," she said, and meant it. Chapter 7, Mirrors That Don't Distort. They visited a mirror museum on a whim, the kind of place that could be tacky or transcendent depending on who you went with. With him, it became a quiet lesson disguised as a date. They moved through rooms that stretched and shrank their reflections. She laughed at the silly distortions and paused at the ones that touched old insecurities. He watched her watch herself. "Which one feels familiar?" he asked. She pointed to a mirror that elongated gently. "That one, the flattering lie." "And which feels true?" She led him to one that barely altered anything, only softened the light. "This, it's honest but kind." He stood behind her so both of their reflections fit. "Good," he said softly, "because that's what I see." They walked home slowly. On a bench, he told her about a teacher who gave him blank paper to write jokes on instead of scolding him for finishing tests early. She didn't punish the surplus, he said. She shaped it. And now you shape mine, she replied, my reflex to make a room easy instead of honest. He smiled. You make rooms beautiful, and when beauty's true, it's not a trick, it's clarity. Back at her place, they made tea and read in companionable silence, the kind that asks for nothing. Later, reading dissolved into touch, fingers idling, breath aligning, warmth gathering. He kissed the inside of her wrist as if reading a secret there. She drew closer, and their bodies continued the conversation words could only summarize. Afterward, he said quietly, "You ever notice how good it feels to be correctly sized?" She smiled, like being in a photo without filters and still liking the image. "I like the image," he said simply. Days later, a misunderstanding at work tested her balance. Old habits whispered, apologize, smooth it over. She drafted an email that erased herself a little and sent it to him first. Instead of edits, he called. "What's the sentence that's true and not self-erasing?" he asked. She found it, spoke it aloud. "Send that," he said. "The person I love is in that sentence." She sent it. The world didn't end. It got better. When she told him later, he smiled. "Mirror that didn't distort," he said. She laughed and kissed him like gratitude finally unburdened. Chapter 8. Choosing with Both Hands. Winter pressed its cool forehead to the city's windows. They let it in where it clarified and shut it out where it bit. Their holidays were a collage, his traditions, hers, and a few they invented, a ridiculous ornament, a New Year's Eve letter exchange. She underlined his line, "I want to keep curiosity domestic." He circled hers, "Compromise, the generous kind, is how love breathes." In January, while washing dishes, she felt a quiet click, like a lock turning. She dried her hands, watching him argue with a stray sprout in the sink, and felt the certainty settle. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he replied, grinning. "I choose you." He blinked, softer now, "Not because I'm perfect. Because you see me clearly," she said, "and let me see you back." He nodded. "Then let's keep choosing on good days and stupid ones." They celebrated with a walk through cold air, matching pace without trying. They wandered into a bookstore, a deli, a church where they lit a candle for the known and the unknown. At home, they added to their menu on the cupboard door. Celebrate decisions without building altars to them. Be brave enough to be boring together. Keep a drawer for surprises. The drawer's first entry came quickly, 2 train tickets to a winter market where vendors sold honey like sunlight in jars. They bought one, tasted it with their fingers, laughing at the stickiness. The laughter became a kiss, the kiss, slow and sure warmth. They remembered that wanting could be playful and reverent at once. After he traced her collarbone, "You okay?" "I'm better than okay," she said. "I'm not performing." "Good," he murmured. "I picked the right us." Life back home wasn't cinematic, it was lived in. A shared calendar, a thrifted lamp, a stubborn plant they kept forgiving. When conflict knocked, they answered together. When delight appeared, they made a plate for it. One evening she opened her old notebook of columns, truth, care, cost, and smiled. Truth and care no longer fought, cost stayed small. She wrote, "Balance isn't a performance, it's a posture." He brought tea, always. "Always," she said. They sat by the window, shoulders touching, reflected in the hall mirror, unchanged, unedited, simply seen. Like this video, subscribe, more stories like this are coming.